627. There's a royal banner given for display to the soldiers of the King. As an ensign fair we lift it up today, while the ransom ones we sing. Marching on, for Christ held everything but lost. For the King of Kings, toil and sing, beneath the banner of the cross. Over land and sea, wherever men may dwell, make the glorious tidings known. Of the crimson banner, down the story tell, while the Lord shall claim his own. Marching on, for Christ held everything but lost. For the King of Kings, toil and sing, beneath the banner of the cross. When the great commander from the vaulted sky sounds the resurrection day, then before our King the faint and foe shall bow, and the saints shall march away. Marching on, for Christ held everything but lost. For the King of Kings, toil and sing, beneath the banner of the cross. Turn all the way over to page 628. If the name of the Savior is precious to you, if his care has been constant and tender and true, if the light of his presence has brightened your way, oh, will you not tell of your gladness today? Oh, will you not tell it today? Will you not tell it today? If the light of his presence has brightened your way, oh, will you not tell it today? If your faith in the Savior has brought his reward, if the strength you have found in the strength of your Lord, if the hope of the rest in his hands is sweet, oh, will you not, brother, the story repeat? Oh, will you not tell it today? Will you not tell it today? If the light of his presence has brightened your way, oh, will you not tell it today? If the souls around you are living in sin, if the Master has told you to bid them come in, if you see in the table they never have heard, oh, will you not tell them the cheering word? Oh, will you not tell it today? Will you not tell it today? If the light of his presence has brightened your way, oh, will you not tell it today? Marking the song was page 939, 939. Before we get started, got one other thing to bring up. The last elders and deacons meeting, and preacher meeting, we discussed the time for Wednesday night. 6:30 is a little tight for some,
that did not work. The hope is that maybe more can get here. But what was decided was that we'd take a vote. And what we're going to do is in 2 weeks from tonight, okay, this makes it important because the people that are trying to get here on Wednesday night should be the ones voting for it. So 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be doing a vote at the end of the service. So that way, if somebody comes in late, they still get a say. All I do is, I think I gotta discuss it, but I still think it's a good idea that we make up slips of paper to people. It's either going to be between 6:30 and 7 o'clock. And let everybody just put it in a box, that way they can put it in a box back there when they come in. And then we can count it at the end of the services. Okay, that's what they have through the end. All right, so I gotta make those little slips up, but you can circle when you want. It'll be 6:30 or 7 or no preference. If you're willing to go with whatever, check no preference. I'm good, y'all. All right, should be in the bulletin this week too. Okay. All right. If you were here last week, we started looking at the miracles of Jesus, and we started looking at last week. We divided them into 4 parts, and we started with his power, demonstrating his power over nature. That's what we did last week. We took all the different miracles, and not all the different references, because some of them are in multiple gospels, but all the different miracles that had to do with him demonstrating his power over nature. And so tonight we're actually going to be looking at his power over afflictions. It's interesting to note and to think about it. This point here, this text, I'm just going to look at it briefly and what it says, but it actually took place just before the Sermon on the Mount and right after his temptations. Okay? So we got to put those things in point. It says that Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease among the people. Then his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all sick people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments, and those who were demon-possessed, epileptics, and paralytics, and he healed them. Great multitudes followed him from Galilee and from Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. And it's immediately after this that he gives the Sermon on the Mount. The interesting thing that we should look at is he has this movement of compassion. And I broke them down into 3 categories tonight. I don't know that we're going to get through all 3 of them. I don't think we're going to get through all 3 of them. But the first one is compassion and healings. It's just the movement of compassion. Some different areas that he's trying to teach us. And then the second one, I have a testimony of faith. So that's of the people's faith that he sits there. He healed because of their faith. And he testified of their faith. And then the last one is where it was done to create faith. And that's what but we're going to start with this compassionate healings. Some of these, I tried to put them as best I could figure in chronological order as they came, as I wrote down each one. Some of them, it's kind of questionable because different writers have them at different places. Okay? And so they're around the same time frame, but not sure exactly. This one, it's interesting because it's either before Peter's mother was healed or it was after Peter's mother was healed. All according to who you ask. I kind of wanted to lean toward Matthew, since Matthew is technically an eyewitness account, but not really, because it was before the calling of Matthew. So I looked at Mark. We know from what we understand, Mark was, He was a nephew or cousin of Barnabas, but he also seems to be a relative of Peter's. And he indicates that he was with them very young. He was a lad, and he was with them. So I kind of took the reading marks, plus I liked some of the things that he said that he brought up. Now it tells us, now a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling down to him, and saying to him, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now, there's a little bit of there, an idea that he believes in faith, but at that point there,
I didn't hear the.
Oh, I'm saying it indicates that he has some belief in Jesus, but he also sits there and says it's on the condition of what you're willing to do. Now, different ones feel like, well, maybe he had some doubt. But, you know, it's kind of like if you go back to Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they are told to either worship the beast or the statue, or they'll be thrown into the fiery furnace, they make a statement, our Lord is able to deliver us. But if he does not, we're not going to bow down. They imply, you know, they know the Lord can, but it's up to the Lord. And I think this is kind of that point that perhaps there is a little bit of doubt, but there's also a point of you have to be willing. Here's a question. Can we say Jesus healed everyone he came in contact with? So it was selected. Tells that Jesus moved with compassion. Let's think about that. Moved with compassion. This man appealed to his heart. Stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. As soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. And he strictly warned him and sent him away at once and said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded as testimony to them. I want to stop there and think about this point. Why did he tell him to do all these offers?
That was part of the custom. That was the teaching. If you were.
Yeah, they teach it the law. That's the point. Okay? Now, see, this tells us that not only was Jesus saying, I don't set aside the law.
Yeah, he had to comply with the law.
He's still complying with it, and he's telling them, you still have to comply with it. See? However, he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the matter so that Jesus could no longer enter the city, but was outside in deserted places, and they came to him from every direction. Yeah. Why did Jesus say, don't go tell nobody?
We all wonder.
Huh?
That's what he told me.
No, everybody won. Everybody's going to win. Well, here's the thing about it. Do you think about how hard it was for him to try to do other things when everybody's coming wanting to be healed?
For whatever reason, or at that point, he didn't want the notoriety that brought. I don't know.
That's part of it. He didn't want the notoriety to the point that he could not move freely. It put a restriction, and I think that's what it came down to. I've heard people criticize the man for saying it, but are telling it. But man, can you imagine somebody asking you, how were you made clean?
We understand the human side of that, because if any of us had experienced it, we'd probably wanted to get on top of the mountain and shout it. You know, you understand it.
Yeah, we do. And everybody's going to be asking. Everybody that knew you had leprosy is going to want to know, how did you get rid of your leprosy? It's kind of like if you sit there and somebody said they were healed of their cancer, but you might want to know how. Somebody's got somebody afflicted with it.
And leprosy was a big cancer for them.
And there was no cure.
No cure.
No cure at all. So, okay, so Peter's mother-in-law says that when Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever, so he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and served them. Now, both Mark and Luke's account say that they told him about her when they got to the house. Told him. People there told him that they were sick. She was sick. Now, that's another thing. Here, what is it? She's lying in bed. And notice what happens. When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with the word, and healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, he himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. Now, there's many things about miracles. Jesus doing miracles. Many reasons behind them. Okay? Some of these were to give opportunity to teach. Some were as a testimony as to who he was. And he says this is partly to fulfill prophecy. And it makes sense. And it's one of those things, you see these, these so-called faith healers. Let me put it this way. So-called faith healers. Why do they never just go to a hospital? Now, they'll tell you it'll be up to your faith, but it's not always up to your faith. What about their faith? If they're such faithful that they can heal, why? There was a certain one flew into Ghana and back in the 80s, and Ghana had at that time very few hospitals, and I'd say probably have very few now, not very modern. And the thing of it is, when you fly into they get all these people off the planes in wheelchairs and on crutches, and they've got all these people there that are sick and being carried on stretchers and everything. Kind of what we're seeing here. And the question the Ghanaians had was, why has he got to bring sick people with him? We got plenty of sick people to heal. But they wouldn't let any of them come to those meetings to be healed. They understood what that meant. Jesus didn't do that. He didn't go. Here, there are some that of these, as I looked at today, that really show the Lord's compassion and how uncompassionate people can be. In John 5, and he calls this the second of Jesus' miracles. It says that after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. So you got all these people that gather up on those porches, waiting for this water to move. angels went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Okay? That's not like a good place to be if you got a disease that you want to get rid of, right? I want to ask this question, because I think this probably happens sometimes. You think that it never happened that somebody had some minor ailment that ran down there in the water to get rid of it? Ahead of those who had major illnesses. We can see people doing that today, right? Now notice this. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. 38 years. You think there are probably people that wasn't as bad off as he was that could have helped him get in the water?
Yeah.
Huh?
Definitely.
Definitely. Now notice, when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, so Jesus knew this. Now here's an interesting point, and I want you to realize this. There's still those balconies full of people, those porches. Jesus chose one. Out of all those people, he only chose to heal one. And when Jesus saw him lying there and knew he'd already been in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" I think he probably did better than I would. Maybe he had an idea who the Lord was. I probably would have wanted to say something like, "What do you think I'm here? I've been here for 38 years. He kind of offers him this story. The sick man answered, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me. So here is a lame man dragging himself, trying to get into the pool. And nobody helped him." And that's what he explains to Jesus. Yes, I do. I try every time. Every time I try. Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked, and that day was the Sabbath. And we'll get to that in a little second. Jesus evidently had a great deal of compassion on this man. And with good reason. Could you imagine for almost 40 years trying to get into that water every time it was stirred up? Now some said it will only happen like once a year, but others said it happened at different times a year. If you weren't there, you missed it. You never knew when it was going to happen. And so for 40 years, he's been trying. And people who were able to walk were beating him there. I can tell you one type of people that wasn't there. No lepers. They were outside the camp. They weren't allowed in.
It's the pool. It's Bethsaida or?
Full of Bethsaida.
Okay, so where was it in reference to the temple?
It was, if I remember right, it was beside Solomon's porch.
So that it was within eyesight of the temple.
It was within eyesight of the
So
temple.
when he walked out of there with the bed, there'd been Jews sitting on there, rocking chairs in front of
Yeah,
him.
we're fixing to get into that. We're fixing to get into that.
I'm joking with that.
Yeah, well, no, you kind of right there on it too. I've been joking, but unfortunately, and that's the problem. And I'll tell you something, we're going to get into this. It's not a problem that has gone away. Okay? Notice that the Jews therefore said to him who was cured, "It is a Sabbath. Is it not lawful for you to carry your bed?" Why did they have a problem with him carrying his bed on the Sabbath?
He was doing something.
Doing something.
He was working.
crooked.
That's not the way the law works.
That's not the way the law worked.
That's their version.
That was their version. Okay? And we're
That was an overcooked burnt version.
overcooked burnt version? Yeah. Okay.
That happens today, you know.
Hold on, Paul, I'm getting there. I'm getting there, believe me. I've been in some conversations on this. He answered them, he who made me well said to me, take up your bed and walk. Now, if this dude can heal me and he tells me to take up my bed and go home, I'm going home. Right?
He can make you better, he can make you worse.
That's right. Okay? Now, notice, then they asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn a multitude being in that place. He told him to go, he'd take up his bed and walk, and then he just kind of faded away, walked away. Afterward, notice where he went. He brought up how close was it to the temple. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, see, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest the worst thing come upon you. Some believe that because Jesus said this, what had happened to him was because of some sin he committed. I think it's more realize that you've been healed and this should change your life. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. It says, for this reason the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him because he had done these things on the Sabbath.
It looked like they denied that he did it.
They didn't deny that he did it, but it's because he did it on the Sabbath. It comes to, as you said, the burnt point of the Sabbath.
Hey, don't you find it just really sad that this man, that you know, they've seen him for years and years, finally was able to stand up and walk and do something. They weren't marveled at that. They were so narrow-minded and kind of literally hateful. Why were they not rejoicing over that man?
Well,
Jesus really had threatened their power, their position, their authority, because what he had done was he had done something that was outside the bounds of nature, and so he was clearly somebody. And that's what they were afraid of.
they saw what they would not admit.
That's right.
More like they thought he was somebody dangerous.
Well, to them, that's what they saw him as, somebody dangerous to their position. Okay? It's kind of like you ever been worshiped with a church that didn't have elders? All that. What happens if you have people move in that qualify to be elders? And you start talking about trying to make elders? Or you actually work long enough that you get these people that are qualified to be elders?
Sometimes it's those who have the most power and the most influence, and they are get their way if they don't.
It's a threat.
And people today,
I've never been in that, but I can certainly see it.
It's happening. Here's the truth. What's the hardest thing to do in the church? You really want to know? Get past human nature. It really is. That's the one thing that hurts the church community is human nature, because human nature does not want to yield what they have. Okay? And I've seen it. In fact, I've seen one man who fought in a congregation to keep it from having elders for years because he knew he was unqualified just on the physical. But what he proved was he was also unqualified on the spiritual side. And he was the treasurer, and as soon as they appointed elders, he said, put down the book. I'm done. Same kind of attitude. Same kind of attitude, but it goes a little further. It's interesting, they go together. Man with a withered hand. Now, when he had departed from there, he went into their synagogue, and behold, there was a man who had a withered hand, and they asked him, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath, that they might accuse him? Why? See, first they get upset with the man carrying his bed, but who was they really upset with? Why? Because he healed the man on the Sabbath. He worked.
And he told them what to do, and he listened to
Him over
instead
there.
of them.
Yeah. Okay? And notice, so now they see this man with a withered hand, they kind of bring him up. Is it lawful? What they want, if they were in a court today, what would they have said if Jesus tried to give them an explanation? They'd say yes or no. We only give you can only say yes or no.
Well, isn't it as lawful for him to heal the withered hand as it was for them to bring him up there?
You got it. But, hypocrites don't see their sin. Then he said to him, what man is there among you who has one sheep, and if it falls into the pit on the Sabbath, will not lay hold of it and lift it out? Now, here's an interesting point. Was that not considered work? He says, how much more value then is a man than a sheep? Therefore, it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. So what did he tell him? It's always lawful to do good. I remember a preacher I knew who told me about in Texas how he got in trouble one time on Wednesday night because he missed services. He called his elders. He was in a Bible study with the family on Wednesday afternoon and said it's going really well and I don't want to leave. And one elder stood there and said, I'll take care of class tonight. So the elders were all good with it. Next day, he gets a phone call from one of the members wanting to know where he was and why he was forsaking the assembly. And when he told him what had happened, and that later that night after services, he had met with the elders for the two people, the couple, to be baptized into Christ, he said, well, you should have brought them to services with me. And which you think would be more important? Getting up and saying, well, come to services with me, and maybe them say stay, no, we're good here, and you lose that opportunity? Or do as he did and call the elder and say, this is going well, I need to stay here. What did the elder?
That person, it was just being wrong.
What did the elders think? What did the elders think?
They took the right position.
They took the right position. I can tell you who it was too, Clint Thurman. You ever read Gospel Minutes? He told me that story one day. I couldn't believe it. We have to understand, this is an example the Lord is telling us, it's always better to do good than to meet a requirement.
We all, if we're not careful, will evolve with our own measuring stick.
Yeah.
There we go.
This is what I think is how it ought to be. We put our little individual measuring stick up there. Sometimes our measuring stick doesn't follow scripture real close if we're not careful.
It may follow some scripture real close, but it usually don't follow the meaning and the heart behind it. You don't know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we take a word or something.
Just take a verse like, you're not to forsake the assembly,
Alrighty.
okay? That means you're, for no reason whatsoever are you to ever
Don't
miss
miss
the
it.
assembly. Okay, well, when I'm dead, y'all drag me on in here. Kind of that point,
Maybe once.
maybe once. And then somebody go, Lord, he stinketh, and that'll be it. You know, and while we're on the subject, see, it's interesting. I remember one time when I was restaurant manager, and I usually work nights and was there on Sunday mornings and in the Oklahoma. But then this one particular weekend, the general manager went on vacation. Gets into the work day shift then. And when you work day shift on Sunday, you were lucky if you got out by 7 o'clock at night. You're in there by 5. It was our end of the week. But anyway, I'm out there setting the tables in what we call the church rush, because that's when everybody flooded in that church. And one of the church members flagged me over. Says, missed you this morning. I will, thank you, I'll just be here. He goes, y'all not let them make you work. That's wrong. I looked at him, I said, if it's wrong for me to work on a Sunday, it's wrong for you to be here because you're creating a stumbling block. If people didn't come to eat, we wouldn't be open. He got mad. Now, you think that's bad? Years later, this was been the late 90s. This long preach was in 2009. They used to have all these Facebook pages for preachers, kind of crazy. I ended up leaving them on. But one day I happened to click one on, trying to clear my mind, and hearing these guys jumping on this guy. Saying that he's sinning, that he has chosen a career over the Lord. And for a moment there, I sit there for a minute and I listen to everything, and I sit there and I just popped in and I asked him, and said, what do you do for a living? I said, I want to know before I say anything, yea or nay, what's going on here. And the gentleman told me, he says, I'm a fireman. He said, we work 4 days straight, 3 days off. So it ends up, I work several Sundays, sometimes in a row, usually 4. Okay. Let me ask this question. What do you do if you don't have a fire, you're just at a firehouse on Sunday? He says, well, actually, I conduct services for me and some of the other firemen. I said, are the other firemen members of the church? He goes, no, I'm the only one. So you're taking the time to teach and evangelize and take the Lord's Supper and worship the Lord every Sunday. Yes, I am. I said, Bob, the rest of y'all need to get on your knees and ask for forgiveness. You're criticizing a man who's doing what's right. And I honestly, who would you rather have if your house caught on fire? A brother in Christ come and respond or what? I said, by your statements, you've made it that nurses, doctors, anybody does this, and I said, we know the Lord healed on the Sabbath, so what's the difference between the Lord's Day? Can't do that occupation. You're saying Christians can't be that occupation, or police officers. And one popped off and said something. And he's the one that was really irritating me because I knew him personally. And I sit there and I said, you're the worst of all. He goes, what? I said, just 2 weeks ago, when I left my mother's on Sunday after services, driving home to Florida, me and my daughter stopped to go to lunch with you and your family in Valdosta. And y'all wanted to go to the mall too. Now you're telling these people it's wrong to work on Sunday, but then you go out and spend money on Sunday. I said, by your own standard, you had better never go even buy gas again on a Sunday morning. If your house catches on fire, you can't call the fire department. If your baby gets hurt, you can't go to the hospital. And he's like, what do you, I said, you sit there and said it's wrong for these people to be working, therefore it's wrong for you to call them to work. Same attitude as the Pharisees. And this man probably doing more on Sunday morning than most of the preachers. One of them. You go back. Deaf man. I didn't go back far enough. Deaf and mute man. This is an interesting one because of the way Jesus does it. Again, departing from the region of Tyre and Sidon, he came through the midst of the region of Decapolis to the Sea of Galilee. Then they brought to him one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to put his hand on him. And notice this, he took him aside from the multitude. He didn't do it right there. He took him aside, separated him, and put his fingers in his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Arakadai, that is, be open. Immediately his ears were opened, and the impediment of his tongue was loose, and he spoke plainly. Then he commanded them that they should tell no one. But the more he commanded them, the more loudly they proclaimed it. There's that human nature again. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, he has done all things well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. It's that point that he makes a difference. He's doing things that nobody has done before. It's always kind of ironic is the way they could not see he was the Christ. And I think it's more of most of them would not see, not that they could not see. Here at Bethsaida. Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. Now I want you to know the difference between the deaf man and this one. Deaf man, he separated from the crowd, and so he almost like he needed room to work, or wanted room to work. Here he takes the man, they bring him, and he takes him outside of town by himself. He asked him if he saw anything. He looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. I could probably make that statement when I take off my glasses. Then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up, and he was restored and saw everyone clearly. Then he sent him away to his house, saying, neither go into town or tell anyone in town. Just go home. Just go home. Let me work. But again, it shows the power over afflictions. Over is this crippled woman is another example of the Pharisees and their attitude. It says, now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity for 18 years and was bent over and could in no way raise herself up. You ever had back problems? Honey, you know what that's like, right? Makes you grateful when somebody helps you, all right? Got a cousin that has had way too many surgeries. They even got a pin going through his spine. His wife told me last year when I called him on his birthday, he's about 80, that he cries himself to sleep every night. But when Jesus saw her, he called her to him and said to her, "Woman, you are loosed from your infirmity." And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, where was she?
In the church house.
In the church house. Probably came to the church house every Saturday. And it tells us Jesus saw her. She didn't approach him, he saw her. Okay? But the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, that he said to the crowd, "There are 6 days on when men ought to work, therefore come and be healed on them and not on the Sabbath." He's questioned her motive. Did she come to be healed? Not from what we read of the text. Not physically healed. Maybe praying that the Lord would ease her infirmity.
He says this as if the other 6 days of the week, there's, Bob and Joe coming and healing folks. Like he's a doctor that, he's just making his rounds on a day that he's supposed to be off.
In fact, he's kind of telling him, why don't you come up here the other 6 days and just wait for people coming in?
He calls him a hypocrite.
He's a little beyond hypocrite.
I mean, when I read this, I know that we do what this guy did. It's in here not just for us to say that other people are doing this. It's in here because we do this.
It's part of human nature. We get upset when things don't go the way we think you want to go. I'll admit it bothers me every time I hear somebody criticizing somebody's work. It does bother me, and it bothers me because of the fact that having been in that position, and not completely by choice. Because generally, you get that same kind of attitude from the people that are questioning. I mean, well, let's be honest. Technically, what's Sunday for me? If you want to get technical. Some people can see it as work. Now, it is definitely a requirement of me in the position I have. Now, I've always tried to look at preaching as being paid, they pay me so I can preach. Does that make sense? The work I do is kind of through the deal, because Sunday morning I need to be here worshiping just like everybody else.
You can't preach if you're not paid to preach and you want to preach.
Okay? I'm not paid to preach. I'm paid so I can preach. Now, some people say that's splitting hairs, but you're right. Actually, let's put it this way. I'm paid so that I can be full-time preaching. Okay?
So, I mean, in this example, though, the Sabbath looses ox or donkey from the stall, so that compares us to oxes and donkeys being set free from our infirmities or our difficulties or our imprisonment or whatever is holding us away from getting what our needs met.
Yeah.
That's suggested by the last
I
sentence.
mean, here's the thing, and honestly, I had this happen one time. I was going down the interstate, we had left a family reunion in Tennessee, it was on the weekends when I'm going to preaching school, me and kids, and we were headed to South Georgia to go to services. And I had everything set up in my mind as far as the time frame and everything. Knew we get there just about the time they started. And I saw a woman on the side of the road with a flat. You know, first thought, well, if I stop and help her, I'm gonna be late. Second thought was, if I don't stop and help her, God's gonna be mad at me. So I jumped out, rolled my sleeves up, had a long sleeve shirt on, changed that tire like I was on a NASCAR pit crew. 10 minutes was all we were stopping. She already had the jack out and everything. I put the jack and spare back in. But I said, you mind if I just throw it in? You gotta go put it back in the spare. I said, okay. I told the kids, be looking for me a clean shirt.
I'm still trying to picture you as a NASCAR pit crew.
I changed flat. In my younger days. But it was fast. For us, I mean, not 30 seconds fast, but for an average person, 10 minutes is fast. But
And for somebody that, I mean, I've been showed how to change a flat, but I couldn't change a flat. But a person will never forget. I mean, for me, I can think of people that have stopped for me that years later, I'm still.
yeah, that was an interesting thing. A cop pulled up afterwards. About the time I got the tire off. And of course, he had his lights, which I was grateful because it kept any of us from getting hit. But then, you know, as soon as it's done, I'm sitting there leaving. We get there just as they start to lower stuff. But it's kind of that point. Do you sit there and say, it's better be late and do what's good? I think sometimes we have to do that. The Lord's sitting there saying, you feed and water your donkey and ox. Well, when you feed and water your bread.
Wasn't that what Jesus was trying to get across to them, though? It's not the letter of the law, obeying the letter of the law that makes you right in God's eyes. It's the spirit of the law that makes you right with God.
And that's what we need to realize ourselves, because we tend to do it.
The church unfortunately can be the worst at that.
Sometimes. And especially when you get that attitude that are teaching in the church. You know, notice, so ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan is bound, think of it, for 18 years be loosed from his bond on the Sabbath. What is he doing here? See, he started rebuking the keeper of the synagogue. Oh, that point, you know what? You're sitting there saying this woman needs to wait. How do you let her wait? Could you see some of the Pharisees having a fit when they were baptizing people on the Sabbath? And probably some of them in the church after they were baptized. And when he said these things, all his adversaries were put to shame, and all the multitude rejoiced for all the glorious things that were done by him. Isn't that what it should be in reality? I mean, all the miracles bring about some teaching in them, and that's what we're trying to look at, because even that point of not holding the Sabbath to the point that you actually cause people to suffer and tie the hands of those who are trying. Is there a difference between trying and not succeeding and just go ahead and choosing not to succeed. Okay, let me explain that. What if, when I changed that lady's tire, it took me over an hour? And it's problems.
Still change your tire.
Still changed the tire, but would I have made it to services?
Oh,
That's what who was preaching.
I might say no. Uh, But, the deal of it is with the Lord have said, you tried and you did good in trying. Okay? Now, what if we'd have got up that morning at the hotel and found a flat, and I said, I'm gonna wait till tomorrow when I find somewhere open to get it fixed?
You want to try.
I wasn't trying. In fact, I made an excuse out of something that could have been overcome. I had a chance. See, that's different. That's what I'm saying. Their idea is we shouldn't do anything for anybody to the point that we have to be at services, even if doing something for somebody to help them would keep us from being at service. It's a spirit over the letter.
You can't overlook the fact either that by stopping and helping the woman, you did the Christian thing, the Christ-like thing. She saw an example of a Christian, and that she would have seen the very opposite as you drove by and did not stop.
Well, she may not have noticed me, but she'd have thought about all those people in the Bible
She
Belt.
could have met you later.
Could have. Whether or not she would have met me and known me is a different thing. No,
But
I won't
Jesus,
back out. But in that attitude, okay, what about that 9-year-old, 11-year-old I had with me?
again, they got to see the example of
See,
what a Christian would do.
well, my point is, even though she had may have never known I didn't stop, they would have known I never stopped.
And you would have.
And I would have, and God would have, but they would have seen in me that there. Comes back to what I said on Sunday. When we do wrong, we hurt our influence over those who care about us.
I once was driving to Beaumont to go help my brother move. And so I was supposed to be there at a certain time.
We were hoping somebody had a flat.
Well, I was almost to it, almost to his house, and there was a truck that had just flipped over on the side of the road, the big trailer. There were 3 vehicles pulled over and people running out there in the grass. They were on their way to it. So there was already a crew there. And I almost stopped. And then I got to my brother's house and he was late. I waited and I said, what is the deal? And then a police officer shows up.
It was a brother in
And
the
my
back.
brother gets out of the police car. I'm like, what in the world happened? He said, well, I flipped the truck over. Sometimes on your way to help your brother, you need to stop and help your brother.
You learned from that one, didn't you? Let's see, what was it Moses said? Be sure your sins will find you out. Not saying that, but see, I'll tell you what, we're a little past. Let's stop here. Let's stop here. We'll pick up next week. Somebody help me remember the band with proxy. I already looked up what it means, so y'all can look up what it means. What proxy is. You know, I used to think I had dropsy when I was a mechanic. I was always dropping screwdrivers and tools and stuff. That ain't what it is. It's a good point, but, you know, miracles didn't just serve for Jesus to prove he was the Son of God. They were opportunities for teach the people of that time. And by those examples, teach us this time. and it is something important. Something I've been thinking about. And I said this years ago, the reason it's so hard to teach an old dog new tricks is because the dog has got set in his ways and refuses to learn.
That's the training.
And what happens is, with people, we let spiritual life, if we're not careful, harden our hearts. That we're not receptive to things, not willing to look at things, we close our minds. And I think throughout the scriptures, the Lord is wanting us to keep an open mind and an open heart. And yes, there will be people take advantage of us, but then what about those that it leads to something even better? If we don't lose heart. 9:39. We'll stand and sing 9:39, and if we can help anyone that's not yet, come, we'll stand and sing.
Oh, do not let the word depart, and close thine eyes against the light, for sinner harden not their heart, be saved, oh, tonight. Oh, why not tonight, not tonight, oh, why not tonight, not tonight, will thou be saved, then why not tonight? Our blessed Lord refuses not, who would live again their soul tonight. If we obey, the work is done. Be saved, oh, tonight. Oh, why not tonight, not tonight. Oh, why not tonight, not tonight. Will thou be saved? Then why not tonight? I want to actually ask if Connor will